Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 11 of our Satisfactory survival series. Now straight away we've got quite a few important things to get done. Off camera I decided to unlock the hover pack. This will end up becoming a rather important item throughout the next few episodes. Furthermore, I also decided to unlock Mark V conveyor belts. This was then followed by the syncing of all of our alien DNA that we have been able to collect over the last 300 plus hours. This resulted in hundreds of additional coupons. And that brings you up to speed on everything that we have managed to get accomplished off camera so far. Today you find me standing on top of a dam. Well, it's not quite a dam yet, but soon it will be. Essentially what we have here is the open seas, which I really like. And this is where my rocket fuel facility, as well as my plastic, rubber, petroleum coke, and other water-based products are going to be made. But we are focusing on our rocket fuel today. And most of our rocket fuel products are going to be coming in from this direction, so we're going to be building something rather, well, stupid. Might have remembered the conveyor belt highway that I was building in my last episode. Well, that's going to be a vital blueprint for today. Speaking of that conveyor belt highway, I've actually made quite a lot of improvements off camera, so let's take a look. Here we have all of our blueprints laid out. In total we have about 10, and they pretty much all serve one simple purpose: to have enough of the conveyor belts on the bottom floor, and then a nice little road on top. These 10 or so different blueprints can be broken down to 3 different sections. The very first one being the straight conveyor belt highway, the item which I'm going to be placing down the most. This is also the blueprints that you saw me make a little bit earlier on. The only downside though is that one of these blueprints will set you back almost 2,000 concrete. Then this straight blueprint, which is the exact same thing again from earlier, just with this little extended bit out here, will cost you over 2,000 concrete, plus the 400 plus iron plates, and the hundreds of other items as well, so it is quite an expensive blueprint. Luckily though, I have been saving resources now for several weeks. We've also got 3 different styles of ramp blueprints. We have an on-ramp, a middle ramp, and an off-ramp. This means I'm easily able to adjust from our ramp to our straight blueprints without any sort of trouble. Luckily though, they are slightly cheaper, but that doesn't really massively matter though, since we are already consuming thousands of resources for this blueprint anyway. Then we have our final category, the miscellaneous items. For example, this 4-way junction, we've also got a corner, we've got a support over there, you can just about see that on the left side, and we've also got a power tower support as well. Essentially, I will be adding some power towers to this blueprint. It breaks away the shape a little bit. I actually really like the way it looks. And also you can use a zipline if you really wanted to. I don't normally use a zipline, but this gives me a pretty good reason to. And this is pretty much all of the blueprints we've managed to make over the last 6 or so hours. Anyway, back over here to the Dune Desert, I want my conveyor belt highway to stretch all the way from down over here, straight through to this direction as well, where we'll be collecting a bunch of different ores and nodes along the way. Anyway, that conveyor belt malarkey can wait for now, because we've got a dam to build. The reason why I'm prioritizing this project first is because I want my conveyor belt highway to begin and end in a certain location, and the best way I can know where to start is by building this first and then seeing where the resources are going to be coming out from. Without further ado, no more waffling, let's try and think of a concept idea for the design, and then we'll try and, well, see how bad it looks. Hopefully it won't look too bad though. Aye. There's 2 main parts that I now want to try and tackle for this particular dam part itself. The first of which is everything above our conveyor belt highway. The second part is then everything below it, which should be far easier. All I'm going to do is make a couple of blueprints and see how they work. If they're great, then, well, great. If not, then we'll make the improvements where necessary. And yes, we've finally been able to get our conveyor belt highway placed down, and honestly, I think it does look quite nice. It is rather highly elevated, but we have ramps in this game for a reason, so I'll most certainly be using a few of those ramps as time goes on. Regardless, for now, I would consider this a nice success. Well, I am pleased to say we are making steady progress. There's still a couple more things I want to try and add here and there, especially right here in the middle of course, but for the actual outer skirts we're not too far off now. There's also a couple extra things I've got to try and do. For example, we are missing a few concrete pillars, I've got to try and fill that in, and there's also a gap in between the actual wall here and the rock, so again, that's going to get filled in somehow. So the next part that I'm going to be working on right now is the middle area. Then we're going to try and work on everything below, which is going to take far more time, but I don't think we're going to overcomplicate things. Hopefully. Here's a bonus clip. If you guys are ever in this particular part of the map, you might find a very small crack in the rock right here. This yellow slug is actually here as a trap, because what you need to do instead is actually come down the slight little crack there in the rock, where you'll be met with, that is right, a summer sloop. And a cat, but don't worry about the radioactive cat. Okay, maybe worry about it a little bit. It is very dangerous and very scary, but there we go. Free summer sloop. Sort of. I must say, hunting for summer sloops and mercer spheres recently, I suppose ever since update 1.0, has been so good fun. So, the main middle part of the dam/wall is now complete. And it's looking fine. I wanted it to look like some sort of dark alleyway going into some mysterious looking cave. And I think we have successfully been able to achieve that. But there is one thing that's significantly buggering me. When we actually go inside the door, you can very clearly see we have used the 4-meter basic wall background, and I do want to try and change that if we can. This is what it looks like from underneath. Again, extremely simple, but it does the job that I needed it to. Now, I want to try and work a little bit on the logistics and actually make sure that everything is properly connected, which yet again is easier said than done. Definitely nowhere near finished, even though it may look like it. But considering we've only spent like 4.5 hours making this, it's not too bad. Power towers are now in place. The only thing left to do now is to make sure that the U-turn at the end of this conveyor belt highway is in place. And for that is right, we have to design yet another blueprint. And here's a design that I managed to make a little bit earlier on. If I zoom that into place over there, that's brilliant. And as you can see, when I place it in, it'll make a bit more sense. We've now got our conveyor belts and our pipes coming straight down here, and some sort of like concrete and glass container. I want that to come down all the way here to the very bottom, where we're going to end up placing down our rocket fuel factory. Now, the only other thing left for me to try and do, other than, of course, like making sure this goes all the way down here, is to then make sure that I've got our foundations ready for our rocket fuel facility. And I do want to be doing all of that, but first, since we've now already started, no, I didn't want to drink my coffee there, let's now finish all of the logistics for this particular area, which luckily I have pretty much done. So let's make sure that the other side of the wall is also done as well, and that in itself is going to take several hours. So there's no better time to start than the present. There is something now that we do have to try and work on, and that is going to be our logistics underneath this particular area over here. Then come through the rock underneath there, then build out directly east. I want it to go preferably in a nice straight line. So we'll have some sort of wall there, some sort of wall on top, have our conveyor stuff, which looks like it's most likely going to come out around about this sort of level. Then obviously bring it out here by a little bit, maybe by 1 or 2 blueprints, and have it just go directly east. The reason why I want it to go east is because it then means it's going to snap directly to our world grid. Eventually, I'm going to have a rather large iron factory out here, so if I get this next part wrong, and if everything's off-centered, then that factory's going to be off-centered, everything else around it's going to be off-centered. So this is going to be rather important. No pressure though, of course. Because of the new auto-connect feature, all of these logistics took us about 10 minutes to do. It really is fantastic, but where exactly are these conveyor belts even coming from? Well, that would be over here. This is where I'm eventually going to start my conveyor belt highway on the opposite side of my dam. And it's where we're going to be getting all of our resources coming into the project. And this is what we got going regarding the exterior decoration, and again, it's fine, it's nothing too beautiful or hideous just yet. However, this is still a massive work in progress. This is pretty much my very first time ever using the auto-connect feature, and if you are doing logistics like this, I massively recommend you use it. It saved me so much time, and honestly, it's pretty good fun. So the main interior is pretty much complete. We have also got some lights in here as well, but I have turned them off because it's causing quite a lot of lag. Now let's talk about the actual road and the conveyor belts themselves, since we're not really done with it, but I've got a rough understanding of what I do want to try and get done. Firstly, regarding all of our logistics. Right there in front of us, we've got a huge grey wall. That is where all of our logistics will be going into. We then had a rather difficult 45-degree angle to work with. I'm coming up with some sort of design. I've also managed to do some calculations, and I came to the conclusion that this height should be completely fine. and we shouldn't be running into any sort of terrain problems. If we do, then use this clip to laugh at me, but no, we shouldn't have any sort of height problems at all with our conveyor belts. Hopefully. Eventually, the height of this main building itself is going to rather dramatically increase because we still have to build the rather large dam. And again, according to my calculations, we're only going to need roughly 180,000 resources. Yes, I am an absolute madman, but you know what? Madmen sometimes achieve good things. Or terrible things, but I suppose we're going to find out today. Simply put, the next course of action is going to be to completely extend this conveyor belt highway, which I'm hoping we can try and do within the next 3 to 5 business years. But I must say, it is a pretty awesome view. And progress has most certainly been made. We have completely finished our conveyor belt highway. The logistics, on the other hand, well, it's nowhere near complete. Even though it might look like it. All the conveyor belts are in place, but I've actually got to remove a few of them, especially further up where I'm not carrying as many resources. But if you do look as far as the eye can see, we have got a lot of conveyor belts currently placed down. However, what I want to try and work on right now is some sort of T-junction. Essentially going straight in front of us, which luckily enough is directly through the canyon. This is where we are going to be collecting our nitrogen gas and one of our sulfur nodes. And I want to try and make it look rather presentable, so that shouldn't be too difficult to design. I also want to try and make a bunch of other blueprints as well, especially to do with our actual miners and how we're going to get the resources from the miners to our conveyor belt highway. Because just dragging them across the desert, even if it's just 50 meters, is not acceptable. Not for me, at least. We've done a lot. Everything from the dam, to the logistics, to the conveyor belt highway. It's all been good fun so far, but we've still got a lot more left to do. Well, I finally finished the design of the miners, and you know what? I hate it. In fact, I hated it so much that I ended up doing 3 redesigns. This was the very first redesign, and I didn't really like this one that much, if I'm honest. There's too much going on, it didn't really feel right, and a lot of it was just unnecessary. This was redesign number 2, the exact same thing as before, but this time I didn't have that massive extension on the roof. And I will say I did prefer this, but having like 30 of these within a very small perimeter of each other didn't look very nice. Thirdly, we had this variant, where I pretty much removed absolutely everything except for the columns along the side, and a little bit of work there in the middle. It was okay, but it didn't look great. So lastly, I came up with our final design. This design just so happened to be the cheapest and the most simplistic one to do as well. The reason as to why I've opted for this design in particular, not just because it's easy and saves us a bunch of different resources, but also having 10 or 15 of them within a certain location doesn't actually look too bad, and it feels like it's almost natural, especially compared to that very first design that I showed you a bit earlier on that was gigantic and looked a bit weird having so many of them in one particular location. As you might be able to see in the background, we've also been able to finish a little something else. That is right, the extension is now complete, and it was so simple to do, especially compared to what I just did prior, so this was actually rather basic, and honestly, it was also quite fun to do. Logistically, well, I mean, this is about it. It was 4 pipes and 1 conveyor belt, and this conveyor belt will be carrying 780 sulfur per minute. We also managed to fully complete all of our main logistics inside of our conveyor belt highway now as well. This extension is a good start, but we still haven't been able to connect our nodes to the highway yet. A couple hours later, and we have everything technically built. We've got the foundation of our miners, and we also have our miniature conveyor belt highways, which links the miners to the highway. And the design itself is rather simple. We've got asphalt as the foundation, some walls on the side, and of course a bunch of lights everywhere. All we have to do now is do this all over again another dozen or so times, which we have now done, and it only took us about 3 hours in total. I'm only collecting the coal, sulfur and nitrogen gas as well, so I'm not collecting any of the other iron, limestone, copper or raw quartz that are also around this area. I am going to need these resources, but not for this project, and certainly not today. We now have all of the raw resources that we need. Regarding this dam, we are far from finished, but if I'm going to be completely honest, building this dam is not remotely important to the actual rocket fuel facility itself. I just want to get some rocket fuel done, get some power sorted, and I might return to this at a future date. In Satisfactory, I think it's rather important to try and prioritize certain projects, and building a random concrete dam is just not very good for us as of right now, even if it does look really crap from behind. I know it probably doesn't seem like it, but we're about 14 hours into this project, and we haven't even started the main rocket fuel part itself. So what we have to try and do now is get all of our resources from here, which we are now collecting, down towards the very bottom here of the sea level. Yep, this would do. Then what I want to try and do now is go out in that direction by a good 100 foundations or so, then 100 foundations in that way, with some sort of unique design here, just like what I did in our last season actually. That would be quite good, but a slightly different design to that, because I don't want to replicate the exact same thing. But regardless, it will be rather similar. And that will basically be it, I think. I mean, everything should be fairly self-explanatory. And our very first corner of the rocket fuel factory is now done. I'm definitely going to be trying to stick with this fort sort of theme, which is something I've never purposely tried to do before. Sometimes I've accidentally built a fort, but never intentionally, so this should be a rather interesting idea. I've gone with this sort of industrial themed for the outside, and I actually quite like it, although there's a couple changes I do want to try and make. Now let's look at these blueprints inside the actual blueprint design to see exactly what I've done. Essentially, this is our main blueprint design, and I've essentially adjusted it a little bit to make our corner designs and some things rather similar to that. But it's rather simple. Signs to the top, a bit of decoration along the sides, there's some pipes there in the middle to make it look like we are sucking up the water from the planet and feeding it into the factory, even though we are kind of actually doing this, because we are going to be needing a bunch of water from outside of here that will then be going to the inside of our rocket fuel factory. So this isn't completely useless, but its main design is just to try and look a bit nice. However, I've also made this second blueprint, which still sticks to the exact same design, but I've made it a little bit different. The entire purpose of this particular blueprint is literally just to jut out, so we don't have a completely flat wall. You can actually see it right here, for example. That is the secondary blueprint that I designed, and everything else around it is the original design. It is extremely simple, but I think it does actually break apart the flat wall a little bit, and that's all I wanted to try and do here. Luckily, a couple of days ago, I was able to find out the rough amount of machines I'm going to need. So 50 refineries for the heavy oil residue, 36 water extractors, roughly 80 blenders, and 576 fuel generators when fully overclocked to 250%. And it's well over 1,000 fuel generators if I didn't do this. And just talking about the fuel generators here, one fuel generator takes up roughly a 3x3 grid for one of my blueprints. So if that's 9 foundations for one fuel generator, times that by 576, and we are talking about many thousands of foundations just for our fuel generators, not including logistics, not including the water extractors on the outside, or the blenders, refineries, or anything like that. Regardless, we had to start somewhere, and start we most certainly have. However, one resource that we are currently missing is crude oil. As you might be able to see there, just on the left side of the screen, I've started to zone out a very small platform right above the water right there. And essentially, that is where our crude oil is going to be coming in from. We're going to try and continue this a little bit further back. Then somewhere down over there, we've got about 1,000 crude oil, and basically, we need that. Well, in total, we're going to need 1,500. And from these 3 nodes that I'm planning to collect, it's going to give us roughly 600 crude oil. So I might as well collect all of this crude oil over here as well, pipe it to one central location out somewhere over here. And all the crude oil that I'm going to need, I'll just pipe over here. Then the remainder of it I can then use for my plastic and rubber a little bit further down the line, which I'll be making hopefully relatively soon, but not today. And that is because we still have a lot left to do. So let's just crack on with it. And surprisingly, within a couple of hours, we have all of our crude oil going next to our other logistics. And honestly, it looks surprisingly good. I wasn't expecting it to turn out like this. But it is rather amazing what a couple of lights can actually achieve. Whereas in this case, they're achieving quite a lot, and carrying the project, I would say. This area down here looks surprisingly nice. I don't know what it is, but it just sort of works. There's a couple of tweaks I do want to make here and there, but for the most part, it's done. And as you might have seen, we are consuming 3 different crude oil nodes, but we're only going into 2 different pipes. That is because we are using 2 impure nodes, which I've combined, because that's about 300 crude oil, and one normal node, which again is about 300 crude oil. So we've got 2 pipes of 300 crude oil, or 600 in total, which is fine, but it's nowhere near enough for what we need today. So that is 600 crude oil down. We've now got a couple thousand more to go, so let's go do it. Because we've now added in our 2 crude oil pipes, it now means that all of our logistics coming in from the east side is now completely finished. We have also labeled all of our pipes and our conveyor belts as well. This means I'm easily able to see what's coming out of what. When it comes to the resources, conveyor belt wise, I could obviously use my eyes to see what's coming out of what, like the sulfur and the coal. And for our pipes, I've color coded everything. So the 2 pipes on the left side are crude oil, then the 4 white pipes are the nitrogen gas. Nice and simple. I've also made sure to give ourselves an absolute ton of room when it comes to our logistic floor. This way we're not going to be scrambling for space. We've got 8 meters to use in regards of height, and when we're all done, hundreds if not thousands of foundations underneath our factory to get all of our logistics squared away and sorted. This, logistically at least, should be a perfect project. Oh dear. We appear to have encountered yet another problem. This is where I wanted all my drones to be. Right here. But we appear to have a very small problem. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to figure out what it might be. Yeah, there's a massive rock in the way. So what I'm probably going to end up doing here is we can still fit in a good few drone ports. I've measured it out. We can squeeze in 4, but rather comfortably squeeze in 3, so I'll probably just stick with 3. Just so I can end up bringing most likely my sulfur and nitrogen gas from over there. It makes the transport relatively simple to do, luckily. And then what I might even try and do is then transform this area here into some sort of outpost area. I mean, this is going to take a very long time to do. We've already got a natural bridge here. We can very easily do a bridge from that little stump to this stump, add a tower there of some sort, have some scaffolding, make it look quite nice, and we can most certainly incorporate it into our build. Yes, we are going to be destroying some coral reefs, but so what? You know, it's all part of the fun. So regarding the remainder of the drones that I want, I suppose when we do our next little square somewhere down over there, we can always have our drones in that direction, but this isn't a gigantic problem, it's just a bit of an inconvenience. Holy lag. We can still easily fit some logistics underneath here though, so that's not a problem. And that's actually quite handy, because all of our crude oil from this side of the biome will be coming in from here. So we've got one node fairly close by, I think it's just beyond yonder. We've got another couple nodes coming from up there, another couple nodes from around there, all of which are eventually going to join together to then come through to there. This is what we're going to try and do right now. I also want to try and make this look as nice as... Oh, Mercer Sphere, right there in the background, right above my head, sorry. I want to try and make this look as nice as possible, so let's just get cracking and hopefully it won't look too bad. Although that is easier said than done. Ah, dearie me. First stage is done. This is not where our pipes are going to be. Instead, this is only the foundation for where the conveyor belt highway is going to go for our pipes. So there's still much more left to do. And it only took us about an hour and a half. I didn't really want to try and cut through any of the built up vegetation area, so instead I went through the lakes, ponds and rivers. But it does look rather silly just having like a massive yellow and black line going straight through one of the most beautiful biomes in the game. So let's try to update this a little bit. Just with a very simple change, this is what we will be left with. And it looks far better than what we currently have, which is fantastic. The lights, again, I think actually contrast quite nicely there with the orange and black stripes. It doesn't look absurd, like it looks natural. Well, it doesn't look natural, but it doesn't look terrible. So I'm kind of fine with this, honestly. I've already finished everything coming through on that left-hand side. Now it's time for everything on the right, and in total, this is what it's going to end up looking like. Thousands of crude oil will be really good, getting tons of resources in, and it doesn't look too bad. Again, I'm trying to make this not look as dreadful as I definitely could have made it look. I think we're doing fine. When it comes to projects like this, I actually sometimes can struggle, because the most important thing for me to try and do is get our logistics completely sorted, making sure that I'm getting the correct amount of crude oil from this project. But at the same time, I don't want to ruin the natural beauty of this particular area. So it's all about trying to figure out the best way to try and make it look nice and get all the resources that I, of course, need. Just taking a very quick look at this from a little bit further away, I would like to think we've done a decent job. However, there is still much more progress left to go. What I want to try and do now is try and figure out all the actual logistics. So how many resources am I actually carrying per pipe? Well, luckily I know that this pipe is pretty much 600, you can't actually get 600 per minute, so we're going to say 580. This is 300, that's 300, and this is 450 crude oil per minute. This is a pure node, so that will then be 600 per minute, which will be coming out from this pipe right here. And now we still have one more normal node left to go, and 2 more impures. But luckily, 2 impures joined together is 300 crude oil, and 1 normal node is again 300 crude oil. So this is actually working out, logistically at least and mathematically, a lot better than I thought it would. And I've been taking full advantage as well of using that auto connect feature as well for the blueprints, and wow, is that thing absolutely amazing. We were using it before as well when we were talking a bit about the dam, and holy lag. We've accomplished a lot already, but there is still a lot more left to do, so let's do it. Just a few moments later, we're finished. We are currently getting 3050 crude oil just coming in from this side, plus the 600 from the other side. That's 3,650 crude oil in total, and we don't even need that much, so the rest of the crude oil will then be used to make fuel, plastic, rubber, and petroleum coke. So let's picture everything that we've done so far in today's episode from the sky. So firstly, we have our dam over there, which is what we worked on towards the very beginning of today's video, with all the logistics behind that. We then have our conveyor belt highway bringing in our sulfur, coal, and some other stuff there, including our nitrogen gas, and some of our crude oil coming in there from the right side. We then have our front wall over here as well with our centralized road, which will be going somewhere out, well, forwards, because that's normally the direction the road goes in. And over here, we then have all of our crude oil coming in. And in fact, you can pretty much see almost every little bit of crude oil that we are now getting from this particular biome. And that is then traveling underneath here. I've tried to avoid using the majority of this area because again, that's where our drones are going to end up being, until eventually our crude oil ends up down there. But just like always, I've labelled the pipes with exactly how much crude oil we've got in each particular pipe, since they're not all the exact same. And even though these two over here do say 600, they're not carrying 600 crude oil. You can't, as far as I'm aware at least, physically carry 600 crude oil per pipe. I don't know why, there seems to be some sort of engine logistical issue, so you can't actually do that. So we'll lower this down to 580 or 575 for the rest of our calculations and maths. Furthermore, both on and off camera, I have been making sure to collect as many of these slugs as possible, since we are going to be needing at least 1,800 of them, which is obviously quite a lot, but it has to be done, otherwise I have to place down like 2,000 fuel generators, and I'd rather not do that. Last, that will conclude today's episode. I do apologize if it was a little bit shorter than usual, but I'm going away for a couple of weeks, and this is all I've been able to record. Bear in mind, this was about 2 weeks worth of videos and live streams, and just a bunch of hours of content narrowed down to barely a few minutes. I've just got so much going on in real life that I can't really afford to spend too much time doing YouTube shenanigans. Regardless, I hope that you guys enjoyed. We're still able to get tons done, and I hope to see you guys on my next live stream. So, if you enjoyed it, thank you very much. Stay safe, pioneers, and as always, cheerio and Godspeed.